No one in our small time-forgotten village, surrounded by the towering Andes Mountains, imagined that the arrival of young Father Gabriel would change our lives in such a radical way. I was just 16 years old when he showed up, full of energy, charisma, and a smile that seemed to light up any dark corner of the church. My family, like most of those who lived there, was deeply devout. My mother attended Mass every week and my sisters Laura and Teresa sang in the choir. My father, although somewhat more reserved, he also respected traditions. Before arrival, the village priest was an old man, Father Anselmo. He had served for decades and was loved by all. However, age had caught up with him and his sermons were increasingly leisurely. His voice was barely a murmur. When it was announced that he would be replaced, there was sadness, but also hope that someone new would bring vitality to the community, and that is how Father Gabriel arrived at the age of 27 with a self-assurance that could result. Contagious. On the first Sunday she officiated the Mass, the church was packed to bursting. We all wanted to see the new priest. He took over the altar with an energy that few of us had seen before. I think we were very used to what Father Anselmo did. His voice was firm in his powerful message and his eyes seemed to look at each person as if they surpassed exactly what they needed to hear. My mother left the church saying that God had sent a real angel to take care of us. Over time, Gabriel became the center. From the life of the village, he organized activities for the children, gave catechism classes and also made visits to the sick. She seemed tireless, but as the months passed, small signs began to emerge that perhaps not everything was as perfect as it seemed at first. They were sighs of admiration. The women of the village, especially the younger ones, couldn't help but notice her attractive appearance. He was tall, with dark hair and well-combed, with a smile that could disarm even the most stoic. Some girls were beginning to. I stayed after catechism classes to talk to him and soon rumors began to circulate. Gabriel was said to be too friendly with some of the young women, that he spent time with them privately under the guise of helping them find their faith. When these rumors reached my mother's ears, she dismissed them immediately. It's gossip from envious people, he told us. Father Gabriel is a good man, he is a man of God. However, I couldn't ignore those comments. Often in the evenings when I was returning from in the field where I worked with my father, I saw Father Gabriel walking on the outskirts of the town, always alone. He said that he liked this because he liked to reflect and be close to nature, but his walk was different, as if he were being guided towards a specific destination. It was a Sunday afternoon when everything began to change. Gabriel returned to one of his walks with an expression he had not seen in him before. During Mass, he announced that he had received a divine vision while meditating on something that was about a few years away. Miles from the village, he said he had heard God's voice giving him clear instructions. Our community should come together more than ever and dedicate their lives to the faith. The effect it had on parishioners was immediate. His message was so passionate that most accepted it without question. My mother and many other women began attending Mass daily, while the men gave time and resources to beautify the church. Gabriel became a central figure, almost untouchable, but I couldn't. I avoided wondering why that lake had been the place where God had manifested himself. It was a quiet place, yes, surrounded by trees and with a silence that could be overwhelming. Some fishermen said that there was something strange about the lake, that it sometimes seemed to whisper when the wind was calm, but these stories had always been regarded as mere legends. From that moment on, something in Gabriel changed. His charisma intensified. I swear it was almost hypnotic. Even those who had doubted him began to follow him with. At a community meeting, he proposed that an old abandoned farm on the outskirts of the village be given to him to be converted into a space dedicated to spiritual education. Without much opposition, the inhabitants accepted, began to remodel and adapt it. Soon the young people of the village began to spend more and more time on the farm. Under Gabriel's guidance, he was said to be engaged in prayer and study, but rumors about the priest's behavior began to intensify. Some families noticed that their daughters returned changed, quieter, more withdrawn, as if they were keeping a secret they could not share. My older sister Laura was one of the first to join the group. At first, my mother was delighted that I was participating in something so pure, quote-unquote, but she soon began to worry because Laura came home late, avoided questions and barely spoke to us. One night I heard her crying in her room, but when I tried to talk to her, she slammed the door in my face. My uneasiness grew when the neighbor Don Esteban, when talking to my father, told him that he had seen Father Gabriel walking through the town late at night, always in the direction of the lake. He said that, although Gabriel was loved by many, something in his behavior was strange to him, as if it were not the same as that of that revelation that was given to my father. Although respectful, he did not want to enter into discussions, But for me those comments confirmed what I already feared. Father Gabriel was changing and he was not doing it for the better. One night, determined to discover what was happening, I decided to follow Father Gabriel. As I was walking toward the lake, I kept a safe distance, hiding among the trees and bushes. When he reached the shore, he knelt down and began to speak in a low voice. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but his words didn't sound like a prayer. They were almost like a kind of conversation. Suddenly the air became colder and the lake, which had been calm, began to stir slightly. I can't tell you that it was an extremely striking show, but something was happening. I backed away scared and ended up stumbling, making noise. Gabriel turned his head in the direction, but I managed to escape before he saw me. When I returned home I couldn't sleep. I knew something was going on, but I had no idea how to deal with it. My thoughts were swirling around what I had seen in the lake and the father's increasingly strange behavior. During breakfast, my mother noticed the silence, but when she asked me if something was wrong, I just shook my head. I didn't know how to explain to him what he had witnessed it without looking like a madman. As the days went by, Gabriel became more influential. The estate we had given him began to become the center of his divine work. The young women of the village came and went carrying baskets of food, clothes and objects from their families. Everything was given with great enthusiasm. No one questioned his intentions, and the few voices that dared to express doubts were silenced with looks of disapproval or impassioned sermons by Father Gabriel himself. During Sunday Mass, my sister Laura Queen used to. Being vivacious and full of energy, she had become a shadow of herself. He spent much of his time on the farm, returning only for meals. When we tried to talk to her, her responses were invasive and monotonous. My mother said Laura was closer to God than ever, but I couldn't help but feel that something wasn't right. One night, while we were having dinner, Laura blurted out something that froze the blood of my sorrows. Father Gabriel says that something will happen soon in the village, something quite big, he said while playing with him. Fork on your plate, something that will change our lives forever. My mother smiled. She was already delighted with the father's words, but I felt a knot in my stomach. When I asked her what that meant, Laura simply replied, "We'll know when the time comes." Rumors about Father Gabriel continued to grow. Some families began to notice more strange things about their daughters. Reserved attitudes, changes in their schedules, even unexplained fainting. A neighbor, Don Esteban, mentioned that he had seen Gabriel entering the farm with several girls late at night. Although this seems harmless to some, the truth is that it was extremely disturbing. "He is too young to be so holy," Don Esteban once said to my father. "No one has so much devotion without hiding something." Papa did not want to get into bad arguments, but he knew perfectly well that those words had penetrated him. My mother, on the other hand, refused to believe any accusation against Gabriel. "He is a man of God," he insisted. "People speak up because they can't bear to see something so pure and true." However, things began to get darker. Several of the young women who attended the farm stopped appearing in the village. Their families said they were helping with the work at the site, but others whispered that they had disappeared without explanation. One afternoon, while returning from the countryside with my father, I decided to take a detour to the road that led to the lake. Something attracted me to it. It was a feeling that needed answers. When I arrived, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Near the shore there were candles lit, forming a. In the circle there were also remains of what appeared to be small animals scattered in the center. The air was thick, as if something invisible was crushing my chest. I backed away slowly, making sure this time not to make a sound. I returned home with my heart beating 1,000 miles an hour. That night I couldn't sleep. I was torn between telling my father what I had seen or keeping it to myself. Finally, I decided to talk to him the next day. "Dad, there's something weird about the lake. I think Father Gabriel." He didn't let me finish. "Fernando, don't get involved in things that do not concern you. The last thing we need is problems with the Father." His answer frustrated me, but it also made me realize how deep Gabriel's control over the entire town was. Shortly after, Laura had a breakdown. We found her passed out in her room with a high fever and muttering words we didn't understand. My mother was desperate and wanted to take her to the doctor in the nearest town, but Laura suddenly woke up and begged us not to take her out of town. "Father Gabriel can help me," he said with his eyes full of tears. "He knows what to do." Reluctantly, my mother agreed. That same afternoon, Father Gabriel came to our house and locked himself in Laura's room for almost an hour. When he came out, he said he had prayed for her and that she would be better soon. My mother thanked him half-heartedly, but I couldn't help but feel that something was terribly wrong. I decided to do my own research one night. While everyone was sleeping, I slipped away to the farm. There were a few lights and I could hear murmuring coming from inside.